was a Mr. Olivero Mizon. He was only 6 months old when my uncle's plane crashed on that farm. Yet he sat around the fireplace in the evenings, just like I did. We sat around a little old radio and we talked. Grandpa drank his sherry wine, but we heard all the stories and all the questions over and over and over again. Now we know. Some of the research that I did, and there's a little bit of confusion here, but I counted that Lieutenant Richard was on his 93rd combat mission that day. He had a total of 559 and a half hours of flying. Of that total, 243 and a quarter hours were in attack. He was doing attack work for 243 hours. Think about that. And all of this attack work and the 106 hours were in pursuit of the enemy. All of this was done in a period of time from January to November when he died. So he was flying sometimes 2 missions a day. But almost every day he was flying, especially in the last few months before he died. He flew mostly P-40 Warhawks and A-36 Apaches. That's the type of plane he was flying on the day he died. The A-36 Apache is a version of the P-51 Mustang. These are awesome planes. If you Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. The plane that he was flying, the Germans called it the Screaming Helldiver. He had dive bombed and strafed and destroyed many enemy tanks and trucks and ammunition supplies. And the day that he died, he was on his way to strafe and bomb railroad cars, also full of ammunition and supplies, that was going to be used against Americans. At the time, we were trying to drive the Nazis out of Italy and send them back to Germany. The actual story of how he crashed, without a formal investigation, we'll never know. The eyewitnesses, both his wingman and on the ground, his squadron had spotted an ammunition truck. When Lieutenant Richard backed sharply to the left to strafe the truck, guns were blasting. Not real sure if the Germans were shooting back, but they probably were. So a battle ensued. In the course of that battle, his wingtip clipped the top of a tree. His plane was inverted and literally started falling apart and crashed into the farm. The plane broke in pieces. Several of the machine guns and engines were falling in these people's courtyard. The part of the plane with my uncle flew about 3 meters over the heads of the ladies who were baking bread in an outdoor brick oven. It flew so low that the plane actually cut the top of the chimney of the oven off. So here comes a screaming plane, guns that had been blasting right in front of all these people, and then, to their horror, when they reached the plane, my uncle was still alive. He literally died with them. They comforted him in his last moments. Because there was so much commotion and noise from the plane, the guns, apparently a local priest arrived, and he did intercede to try and get the Germans not to destroy the plane of my uncle. We always wondered why his personal possessions were undamaged, and they got back to my grandparents before his remains did. It was because of these wonderful people. They had secured his personal possessions to make sure that the family got them back. They secured my uncle's remains, actually buried them in his garden, according to one of the emails I got. When the Americans came through and retrieved the remains of the soldiers they could find, apparently they took my uncle's remains to what is now the Sicily Rome American Cemetery. It's run by the American Battle Monuments Commission. It's one of a lot of overseas cemeteries where a lot of our American military war dead are buried. In this particular cemetery, there are still 7,861 young Americans buried there. rows of white crosses on an immense field of 77 acres. The scope of it is just overwhelming. Wesley was in a temporary grave there until 1948. So it was 5 years later, my grandparents were finally notified that his remains could be returned to America. Well, they didn't know what they wanted to do, so they went to Father Melanson, actually Monsignor Melanson of St. Catherine of Siena in Metairie, where he had grown up. And Monsignor Melanson's response was very simple: bring him home. And they did. And their lives followed a simple ritual. They kept their son's memory alive by telling us the stories. I spent many hours sitting in my granny's attic going through my uncle's belongings and listening to those stories. My grandparents had gardens on all sides of their house with seasonal flowers blooming all year long. They lovingly cut a bouquet every Sunday morning, brought it with a little whisk broom and a pitcher for water to this very spot before 5 o'clock Mass on Sunday morning. Grandpa would clean the headstone and Granny would arrange the flowers. Then after they went to Mass, they'd come by our house. Granny would drink her coffee and chicory with boiled milk, and Grandpa would drink his first shot of sherry wine for the day. It was a routine they followed every Sunday until their deaths. I'm glad our family has this closure, this final chapter. Granny and Gramps are lovingly buried on each side of my uncle, but I know they're reunited in heaven. As Sal said, there's a day of remembrance in Italy on this day too. The mayor of the small town is going to be there, I'm sure most of the residents. American and Italian military officers will be there from Aviano Air Force Base. They're going to have a mass, they're going to make speeches. The one remaining piece of my uncle's plane is going to be donated to the local museum with a plaque naming my uncle. These wonderful people made it possible for us to know the story, and we'll be eternally grateful to them, but especially to my uncle and all the Americans that fought so hard to secure our freedom. And at first when I was asked about all this, I thought, but he was just one American hero, and why are we doing this, honoring one American hero, when there's so many American heroes, both dead and alive? And then I came to realize that in honoring one, we honor them all. We honor all of our patriotic Americans who fought and sacrificed for our country, and the God-given liberties that we enjoy today. From Aviano Air Force Base, there was an airman named Ryan Conroy who published an article that's on the internet right now. He's with the 31st Fighter Wing in Aviano, and he wrote, since World War II, more than 80,000 service members are still unaccounted for from past American conflicts. 80,000. Their families are still wondering where they're at. Currently, America is in a sustained effort to achieve the fullest possible accounting of missing service members by locating, recovering, and repatriating their remains. The Brigadier General John Norman of the 31st Fighter Wing, he said, no other country has dedicated so much time and so much energy to account for their fallen. We do this because we believe that every life is precious. Those who put their lives on the line for this country need to know we will spare no effort to bring them home. Perhaps our story, Lieutenant Richard's story, will inspire others to help us locate some of the 80,000 still missing in action. Thank you all.